go. Beautiful fish. See if we can get a few more of them, we'll be happy. G'day guys, and welcome to today's video. So in front of me, I've got some Munroes soft plastics. So what I'm going to go through today is some of the range that I have. Now, the Munroes soft plastics have an extensive range. I only have a handful of different lures in my arsenal at the moment. But Munroes is also a sponsor of Yak Hunters Victoria's Metro Brim series. So I'm going to showcase some of the lures that I have, and I'm going to talk you through how I like to rig those plastics, and then what I would use those plastics for, what to target with them, and what areas I would use them in as well. So the first plastics we have, these are the zip tail worms in motor oil, and they're UV enhanced. And you've also got the zip tail worm in caramel clear. I'll get one out and I'll show you a couple of different ways to rig them. Once we've rigged them up, I'll explain to you where I would fish with these lures and what we're going to be targeting. Right guys, so there's multiple different jig heads on the market that you can get for all different types of applications. Now, some of the jig heads that I like to use, so I've got a Nedlock's weedless jig head here in front of me. Another one I have is your standard head down, tail up Nedlock's jig head. I personally use the Nedlock's jig heads on pretty much everything I fish with, probably over the last 6 months, just because they're so good and so versatile. All right guys, so I'm gonna rig up the zip tail worm on a Nedlock's weedless jig head. So go in through the top, out through the bottom of the worm. We feed that in, so the little notch goes inside the worm, just like so, like that. And we get the worm, we want that worm to be sitting nice and flush. So there's your hook, you want it to be sitting just about there. You come around to the bottom, thread that through to the top, and there you have your worm, perfectly presented on a weedless jig head. Where I would use this in particular is when I'm fishing in the salt water and I'm chasing primarily flathead. Flathead love the motor oil worm and the clear coloured worm as well. That's why I've got these two colours. So the advantage of using this worm and this weedless rig is, so if you're fishing for flathead and you're looking at fishing the edge of weed beds and stuff, if you go into the weeds, you're not going to foul up on any weeds because that hook tip isn't exposed, and you're going to have a better chance of keeping that lure nice and fresh and clean, and then a fish is going to pick it up and take off with it. All right guys, so up next I'm going to show you how to rig it on just your standard Nedlock's jig head. Work out on the lure where your hook's going to come out, so it's about there. So you go in through the top. Now this time you want to come through the top of the lure, obviously not the bottom. It's about there. Feed that lure on so it's nice and straight. You don't want that lure clumped up too much. You want it as natural as possible. And there you have perfectly presented zip tail worm on a Nedlock's jig head. So when that hits the bottom, it's going to sit on the bottom like that, and the tail of that worm is going to be working in the water column. What I'm going to do now is I've gone out and created my own jig head. All right guys, so this is my little stinger hook jig head rig that I've done. So all you have to do with this one, same as your standard jig head, feed it through the top. I'm going to come out about there, and there is your standard jig head. Now what you want to do with this other hook is just go to the back. Now I've left enough slack on this line so that I can pin this guy in through here, pretty much just like this. I'm going to leave that hook just exposed, and there you have it. So now if something comes along and it takes the tail off this soft plastic, it's going to get picked with this back little hook. So that's how I do my stinger hook rigs on the Munroes zip tail worms. So the second lure that we've got is, we've got a couple of different packets of these in a couple of different colours. So this is the Munroes Ripple Bug. Now it looks like a little squid imitation, obviously not in this colour, but they come in a range of different colours. I've got the sandworm, which is this guy here. It's like a brownie flecked type pattern. The caviar, which is this guy here. It's like a see-through pink. Got the swarf, and we've also got the chartreuse. Now the chartreuse, I pretty much brought that just for something different, so that I've got something bright and something out there, so that when I'm fishing in fresh water and I want something that the fish are going to be able to see, then I'm going to chuck one of them on, and hopefully we can pick up a freshwater species. So we'll go on out, we'll rig it up. There's probably a couple of ways you could rig this, but the way I rig this normally, you could rig that up on your standard Ned Locks jig head. So we'll go through the head and bring it down. Obviously you want to make sure that's straight, and you pop him out roughly about there, all the way up, and there you have it. So when that guy sits in the water, he pretty much sits head down like that, or tail down like that, feelers and claws and stuff up in the air. So you would use these guys in freshwater applications, and they'd represent like a fleeing yabby or a crustacean of some kind. Now you could also use these out in estuaries as well. The way I would rig these up if I was using them in an estuary chasing, say, brim or something like that, or the way I would rig them up for brim is with this guy here. So this is a hidden weight system jig head. Now, not everyone's the same, and not everyone has to rig them up the same way I do, but this is the way I like to rig these plastics, and this is how I've had success with them. So you just go in pretty much the same as your standard jig head. You feed that through, bring that weight system all the way through to the plastic. All right, and there you have it, guys. Nice hidden weight system, hooks exposed. You could probably use that if you're fishing like under boat hulls or long jetties or something like that for brim, and I reckon that would be absolutely dynamite. All right, guys, so one other method that I want to show you with the ripple bugs is with a weedless worm hook. So where I would use this application is the Geelong waterfront, and anywhere you're fishing in like a marina type area. Now the Geelong waterfront is renowned for snapper, so what you would do is chuck one of these on, probably not in this color, probably go with the swarf or maybe even the bloodworm, and you want to keep it as light as possible. So with this worm hook, what you want to do is go just through there and come out the bottom, feed that around, make sure that the weight is underneath the plastic. You want to get this guy, work out, probably go in about there, feed that through, and there you have a perfectly presented bait. To a snapper would probably look like a little squid, like a little baby squid, drifting through the water column, and that is absolutely deadly when chasing snapper in snapper season down in Geelong in Corio Bay. All right, guys, so another one of the plastics that I've got from Munroes, but now that trout season's open, I want to get up to a couple of streams and give these a crack. These are curltail bugs. So what they look like is little mud-eye imitations. Now, they've got like a grub style tail, and they're only 1.5 inches, maybe 2 inches long. And yeah, they look like little mud-eyes. So we'll get one out and I'll show you how I rig this up. I would use this primarily fishing for trout, really. It's a mud-eye imitation. You could probably put that under a float and just have it bouncing around with a little bit of scent. You'd probably pick up a trout with that as well. But what I would do with this would be perfect if you're fishing little streams and little rivers that have got a lot of crustaceans, maybe after heavy rain and something like that. But I would go probably this jig head here. This is a little standard jig head, or even a hidden weight system jig head, but all you'd have to do with this guy is go straight through the head, come out under there, and there you have perfectly presented little mud-eye imitation for trout fishing. Alright guys, so another one of the Munroes soft plastics that I have in my arsenal is just your standard grub. So these are the 2.5 inch grub in caviar, and I've also got a 2.5 inch grub in caramel eclair. So that's these guys here. This pink grub, 12 months ago on the Werribee River, this pink grub was doing absolute dynamite on the estuary perch in the system. But this lure on style jig head, so this is your jig spinner with your standard jig head on the bottom, and this grub paired up with this, just the estuary perch in the Werribee River could not resist. So there's a range of different colours with these grubs as well, and they're really light and they've got so much action. You can wind these really, really slowly, and you can get really good action on the tail when they're wound really slowly. So if you rig this up on a jig spinner, this is how you do it. So you pretty much just go straight through the top, make sure your plastic's straight, come out through there, feed that on, and there you have a perfectly presented bait for an estuary perch or even a redfin in the Werribee River, or pretty much any freshwater species will chase that, depending on what colour lure you have. But I'll show you how to rig it up pretty much the same way we rigged up a lot of the other plastics with our hidden weight system. So you get your hidden weight system, you feed that through, out through the top, feed your plastic on. That soft plastic slowly going to sink through the water column. That tail is going to do all the damage, and you're going to pick up a brim fairly easily with a motor oil grub. Anyways guys, there's a couple of these soft plastics. We've got one more that I'm going to show you as well, and I rigged this up a couple of different ways, and I have used this before multiple times and caught many species. 3.75 inch paddle tail in swarf. Now I've got 3 colours. So I've got the swarf, I've got the ash, and I've also got the 2.75 inch in Tejan, which is like a red watermelon type colour, and they also come in the whole range of colours as well. But I've only got these 3 different colours at the moment. I am looking at expanding and getting a few more colours because Munroes plastics work. Alright guys, so let's go through some rigging techniques on the 3.75 inch paddle tails. Pretty much use the same rigging techniques on the smaller paddle tails as well, just with different applications on where you're going to be fishing and the weights and stuff. So one in particular, I've already rigged them up. It's pretty self-explanatory. I've rigged up a couple of other ones already, so it's basically the same sort of rigging technique. So a couple of different ways you can rig these guys is your hidden is your weedless jig head. So this is a weedless jig head here, weight on the bottom. So this lure is going to sink pretty much straight down this way, and that big paddle tail is going to be blooping through the water as it goes down. I know for a fact that these paddle tails in the glass monkey colour have actually been working a treat on the Werribee River bass and yellow belly population over summer. So get onto them if you want to get a yellow belly or a bass from the Werribee River. Rigged up very similar as far as I'm aware. Another way you can rig these guys is pretty much the same as what we just did, but we've gone with the Nedlocks head down tail up jig head. So that means this lure is going to sit on the bottom like that, and the tail is going to waft around. This is the way I rig this lure, and I have the most success with this lure down off the Werribee South Rockwall, chasing salmon with this lure. And that is with your standard TT Lures jig head. Now this is a 3.0 jig head on a 1/8 of an ounce. There you go guys, there's the Munroes soft plastics range that I currently have in my arsenal. Get over to his Facebook page or his web page, check out Munroes soft plastics. They do sponsor the Yak Hunters Metro Brim series here in Victoria. His plastics work, they're absolutely brilliant. They catch a range of different species. Munroes is an Australian made brand, and he makes his own plastics here in Victoria. So anyways guys, get over to the Munroes website, have a look at what he's got. He's got a range of different plastics in all different colours for that are suitable to all different applications, freshwater, saltwater, you name it. I hope you liked that video. It was a quick rundown on some of the Munroes soft plastics that I use and I have had success with. Obviously the way I rig plastics isn't the same way everyone rigs plastics, but it's the way I rig them and I find that they work that way. Anyways guys, if you liked today's video, give us a thumbs up, and until next time, see you on the water. Cheers guys, thanks.